As you may have noticed in some of the earlier examples, there can be more than one subdivision used with any particular subject heading. When you have multiple subdivisions with a heading, these are called subject heading strings, and they're fairly common. You might be wondering how you can decide what order to put the various subdivisions in when you're creating a subject heading string. Well, a good rule of thumb is that when the string begins with a topical main heading, the order is topic, then place, then time, then form. So here's an example of a topical heading for knitting, then the geographic subdivision, Nebraska, then the chronological subdivision, 19th century, and then finally the form subdivision of fiction. On the other hand, when a string begins with a geographic main heading, a good rule of thumb is that the order is place, then topic, then time, then form. So here's an example of the geographic heading, United States, which followed by the topical subdivision, economic conditions, and the chronological subdivision, 20th century, and the form subdivision, statistics. And even if you don't have all of those various types of subdivisions, still that same rule of thumb holds. If you take out one of the subdivisions, there's still the same basic order. So we have knitting, then the geographic subdivision, Nebraska, and finally the form subdivision, fiction. And then we have United States for the geographic subject heading, economic conditions as a topical subdivision, and then the form subdivision of statistics. Now this rule of thumb doesn't always hold true. There's some variation, mostly dealing with which topics and which subdivisions are allowed to be geographically subdivided, but this is a good place to get started. Another kind of trick to use to make sure that you are putting your subdivisions in the correct order is to try and read backwards your string and see if it actually describes what you are trying to catalog. So if you have a magazine that is about the history of popular culture, this could be a subject heading you want to use. It would be popular culture, then history, then periodicals, because if you read it backwards, you have a periodical that is about the history of popular culture. Now, for example, if you read it backwards and it doesn't describe what you have, for example, if you actually have a book that is the history of periodicals about popular culture, then this would be the subject heading you'd want to use instead, and not the first one. In this case, periodicals is a topical subdivision and not a form subdivision, so it doesn't come last.